presentation in full with you because you'll see clips of it throughout the day. So if you're interested in having the full presentation emailed to you, please let us know. Right now, we're going to turn it over to Heather.
Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to thank Sandra for putting this together. I'm sure you will have a nice relaxing weekend after this, I'm sure. As Sandra said, I am a visiting professor of special education at Cal Poly Pomona, and my research interests are transitioning students with disabilities to four-year settings. That has become a bigger issue over the past 2 decades as more and more students pursue four-year degrees that have disabilities. My interest is more in students with learning disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and the best way to transition them to four-year settings to prepare them to be successful. But my dissertation work looked at students with all disabilities at four-year settings and their experiences and perceptions of accommodations they received and their experiences with faculty and other students at four-year colleges. And just to introduce our panel, I'm probably going to go out of order. Let's start with Paul. Paul Hardister is the director of the Office of Career Management here at CGU and has been in the field of higher education for over a decade. He's an MBA graduate from George Washington University and alumnus of UNC Chapel Hill. Did you just want to talk a little bit about your experience here at CGU or over the course of your career in disability services?
Good morning. Well, I can project. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I am Paul Hardister, Director of the Career Management Office, and one of the things that I would recommend to any job seeker is joining a professional association. It's a great way to network. They often hold conferences such as this one. And a great way to build your resume is to volunteer for events, just like this one. So, there we go. I think it's working now. Hopefully everyone heard what I said before, but again, it's a great. Do we have volunteers here today that we could stand up and recognize them? I think would be good.
We have most of them are outside.
Oh, okay. Well,
so we do
thank them on their way out because again, it's one of the things that I always recommend to all the students that come and see me is because oftentimes one of the things that employers are looking for in any candidate is experience, and oftentimes students who are coming right out of undergrad and even grad school are lacking that, and that's just a great way to develop that. So I think if there's one piece of advice that I would give to any job seeker, it would be that. So I guess I'm sure there'll be other questions, but just to kick off the discussion.
All right, our next panelist is Greg Ferrer. Okay. And he is the counseling director of Disabled Students Programs and Services at Riverside City College. He's also served as an assistant director of disability services at UC Irvine. He has a BA in psychology and an MA in counseling. And he works with students who have psychological, learning, mobility, medical, and other disabilities at Riverside City College. And he has a special interest in students on the autism spectrum and has developed and facilitates a social skills club for students at his school that are on the spectrum. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Good morning, everyone. I'm sure other questions will come along the way, but in general, just to give kind of a background, I'm sure what we're all seeing. About 5 years ago, RCC was a district, it's still a district, but it had 3 colleges, and 2 of the colleges were considered kind of campus satellites. Those individual campuses are now colleges. At that time, all 3 of those sites, so Riverside, Northern Moreno Valley, were serving approximately 1,500 students through our offices, 1,500 students with disabilities. 5 years later, Riverside alone is serving about 1,750, with each of those 2 colleges on their own serving about 600 to 700. So that tremendous growth is something that colleges really across the country have experienced. And though the students that we're seeing are ready for college and ready for support services, we need to meet them halfway. And we need to find solutions and find ways to meet the needs of the students. So I'm sure we can address more as we go along, but thank you for coming.
Our next panelist is Masood Saleh, and he has a BS in Civil Engineering, an MS in Assistive Technology Engineering from Cal State Northridge, and he's a PhD student in Engineering and Industrial Applied Mathematics in a joint project with Cal State Long Beach and CGU. He is an APACT IGERT Fellow, and it's in a program funded by the NSF on Person-Centered Assistive Technologies, and that's joint with Cal State Long Beach and Arizona State University. He's an assistive technology practitioner who's licensed by, is it RESNA or RESNA? And which is the Rehabilitation Engineering Society of North America. And he's a member of the RESNA MC Standards Committee. And he has worked in engineering for over 15 years, and many of his projects have been in accessibility and ADA compliance.
Hello everyone, and thanks for coming. Actually, you told whatever I wanted to say.
Oh,
so
sorry, I stole your thunder.
But what I want to talk about is the opportunities that are available for getting to this field. Yeah, actually, I would like to introduce. Actually, I'm working on the private field most of the time, but I am very interested in directing the attention of people to opportunities available through NSF, through NIH. They are providing generous grants for interdisciplinary teams to work and tackle the problem of disability, because this is, adding the sheer volume of aging population, we are going to have a fight over the existing resources that are very limited already. So the universities and the higher education systems are working there as they're assembling their departments to provide programs such as certificates all the way to master levels to assistive technology engineering. And maybe many of the students don't know, and that's a great opportunity for them. I also like this platform, this movement that has been started by CGU to be used as a platform to bring the disabled community and the higher education system to work together so they can define the problems that they're facing every day. And then the higher education system can tackle and provide the right solutions, because this field is not like any others. The problem is defined by the end user, and the solution must also be tailored to fit them exactly. Because again, after all, it is person-centered design, not a universal design. So in case of any question, I would be happy to answer. Thank you.
Our next panelist is Tammy Green, and she currently serves as the Learning Skills Specialist and Counselor for the School of Medicine at UC Riverside. She previously served as the Director of the Learning Support and Testing Center and the Office of Disability Services at La Sierra University. She's also served students with disabilities at the University of Southern California and Cal Poly Pomona. Her experience in higher education spans 17 years, 13 of which include direct service to students with disabilities. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, a Bachelor of Science in Organizational Communication, and she's currently completing the degrees of Master of Ministry, Doctor of Ministry, and Doctor of Education in Educational Administration and Leadership.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's quite an honor. In my newly appointed position at the newly formed UC Riverside School of Medicine, part of the challenge there is to educate the staff and the facility there regarding the experience of medical students with disabilities, and to open their eyes and broaden their horizons to the reality that medical students with disabilities can go on to be medical doctors in any specialty area of their choice, while also meeting the technical standards of the program. I also work with medical students to deal with issues of anxiety and stress surrounding being a medical twice. Prior to that, I've only been there within the last couple of months, but prior to that, my time was at La Sierra University, where I was the director of the Learning Support Testing Center and Office of Disability Services, and I enjoyed that work very, very, very much. One of the things that was a big takeaway for me there was the idea of educating the community to get buy-in from faculty and staff that would provide a supportive environment for students with disabilities. Also trying to destigmatize and demystify the concept of disability for students that have suspicion of the presence of a disability in their lives, regarding them as students with disabilities, not a person that has a disability who happens to be a student. So a lot of my work surrounded those types of philosophical constructs, and I'm hoping to continue to further that in the community as well as in my newly appointed position at UC Riverside.
Okay, our last but not least, panelist, we have Brenda Primo, who is the Assistant Vice President of Government Relations at Western University of Health Services. Brenda has a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, a Master's in Business Administration. She's a Senior Executive in State and Local Government, and she's completed leadership training at Harvard University. Brenda's career choice, she says it chose her instead of her choosing it, as she found herself needing to advocate with other students with disabilities to receive services and accommodations to be successful in college. And then she, after she graduated, she found that people with disabilities had difficulty with everyday tasks, barriers to housing, transportation, employment, and healthcare. And in 1977, she became the founding executive director of Dale McIntosh Center for the Disabled. From 1977 to 1991, she worked with the advocates and leaders that created the independent living system that is now throughout California. In 1988, she was appointed to the National Council on Disability and was part of the team that developed the language that was provided to Congress to become the American with Disabilities Act. In 1991, she was tapped by the Department of Rehabilitation to oversee growing services in independent living centers, blind and deaf services throughout the state, and was appointed by Governor Wilson to become the director of the California Department of Rehabilitation from 1994 to 1999. She is the director and founder of the Harris Family Center for Disability and Health Policy at Western University of Health Sciences since 1999.
Hello. She read my background. I'm a person who has a disability. I am not a disability. That is not who I am. I'm a person who, as part of the cluster of characteristics, strengths, and weaknesses I possess, I have to read things close to my nose. I have worked for Western University, which is a university with 9 medical schools. One is medicine, School of Osteopathic Medicine, but we have pharmacy, optometry, podiatry, dentistry, veterinary medicine, which is one of our pet and most favorite programs. Mm-hmm. We designed our program it's not a program for only for our students with disabilities. It's a campus program. It assesses everything from campus accessibility to graduation ceremonies where students' parents, grandparents, and in some cases great-great-grandparents can attend and put their own children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren. It looks at the health and wellness of the faculty, staff, and administration, and all costs related to access are centralized to the office. I don't know how many of you are budget managers, but if it doesn't have to come out of your budget, you're more willing to look at how important it is for your employee to have it. We also do a policy development in the state. That's where I got that other title, Assistant Vice President of Policy. Because we look at healthcare as a whole, and in today's world, with Obamacare, with the ACA, with pilots in the duals, which is Medi-Cal and Medicaid, and with the mandatory managed care for folks with disabilities and seniors, what the plans didn't know could cover a whole lot about access. We do all of that with the idea that we're talking about somebody with specific capacities. People who are smart enough with learning disabilities, with physical disabilities, with other kinds of disabilities, sensory, to become medical practitioners. But we have to be able to look at the environment and provide the accommodations which enable them to demonstrate their capacity. We don't always advocate that you might want to enter all specialties. We had a blind student who has graduated as a psychiatrist at Patton State Hospital. He now works at Patton State Hospital. I promised the president he wouldn't be a brain surgeon. It is important for me to say the language, and we stumble over it all the time because it's so important to our culture to define our values. Whenever we put an adjective before a word, people have needs. But when we say special, we separate the population. When we say people have unique, we separate the population. When we just talk about a person's needs and their abilities and how to best develop a program that enhances their abilities, then we're talking about people. We're not talking about special people. We're not talking about unique people. We're not talking about disabled people. Each of us has areas in which we are weak. It might be matching colors. It might be having to fit things into spaces. It might be math. It might be reading. But if we look outside of that, we see people. We don't see special people, unique people. We see people. And I think that's the characteristic kind of message I'd like to start with as we go through the discussion.
I guess to start us off, I want everyone to feel comfortable to join in the conversation and ask questions or have comments. I was wondering if we could start off by speaking to, because we have such a great wealth of experience here, what changes you've seen over time in this particular, in the disability support services field, and where you see things going in the future.
I guess involvement of technology is the most thing that is going to affect this field. If you look back like about 2-3 decades, you're going to see how much there was a huge leap forward in on daily lifestyle thanks to technology, and now it is turning its point toward this field. And for instance, these days, smart homes are not just about turning on the light and turning off the stove and setting the thermostat. They are actually predicting you, they're anticipating you, and if something happens, they're going to intervene. And these smartphones, these little gadgets that everybody carries, actually redefine the field of telemedicine. You know, there are tens of thousands of apps, health apps, that has basically takes your blood pressure, send it to your doctor, and get the result and bring it back at the same time. So I believe technology is something that is going to basically change the face of this technology, the disability, field of disability, and it's going to stay here. So we need more people to work on.
Just in general. Oh, I'm sorry.
I would like to comment on the rise in the number of students who present to Office of Disability Services with mental health disorders. There's been a significant increase, and I forget his name, Director of the Montour Counseling Center here. Yes, sir. I'm glad you were able to sort of break down the types of dynamics that students present to the Counseling Center for, because many students now, and I attribute it to just the culture of our era. It's busier, it's more challenging, the tasks are greater, the responsibilities of all of our lives are greater. If divorce rates are higher, identity issues are greater, not just sexual identity, but so many other kinds of identity issues. And the demands that are placed upon us to be mothers and husbands and wives and aunts and caregivers and workers and employees and all of these things. These kinds of things sometimes are the breeding grounds for an incapacity to deal with life without becoming overwhelmed, and it has a direct impact on a person who is a student trying to be successful in higher education. Therefore, students report, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling overwhelmed, not just with school, but my life in general predisposes me to the diagnosis of, I know we don't like that term, sir, but of generalized diagnosis, generalized anxiety disorder, depression, bipolar disorders. And so I personally, in my work with students with disabilities, have begun to see a rise in that and the coexistence of those diagnoses with things like ADHD and learning disabilities, for which the interventions and accommodations for those types of students can be one and the same, but sometimes they have to be tailor-made and specific for persons with mental health disorders, and we have to come up with creative ways to provide intervention. With dwindling budgets and with the presence of students with mental health disorders on the rise at the same time.
Well, Tammy took my answer, but I'll piggyback off that and say that it's been a huge growth in students who bring forward psychological disabilities and other health issues that we really haven't seen much of. And the difficulty for a lot of disability service officers is to make the connections with faculty and staff to let them know that the accommodations those students will receive to address their specific needs are not going to be the typical time and a half or note taker. Now they may be, but there are so many different individualized accommodations for a student with severe depression or a student with bipolar disorder. And to make that connection with faculty, and I'm glad that we're having this symposium today, is huge. It can't be stated enough. And I've worked with students and I've told them, a lot of students, and I think everyone would agree here, they're not really huge fans of walking through our door and asking for the support. Usually we see them at the 11th hour because there's really no other option. They've been told by their instructor, by their dean, by someone, something's going on and I'm not a doctor, you need to go see someone, now it's affecting your status at the college. So when they come in and they bring forward all these issues, going back to the instructor and trying to explain within the confines of privacy for the student, trying to explain an invisible disability, which is what we're seeing more and more of, it is kind of the juggling act that we're all doing. And so I implore you to go back to your individual colleges and sites and build a relationship with your counseling centers, with your health services centers, so that you can have a working relationship with those departments and get those students any services they might need.
To piggyback off of what you were saying, and I can relate to this about the 11th hour thing, and also in terms of the stressors and the anxiety builders, of course, working in the career management field, you know, a lot of times students will wait until the day before graduation or sometimes even 3 months after and say, well, I've been trying to find a job and I can't. So one of the things I always try to say is that it's really important to come early. I mean, from day one, so that you can develop a plan and develop those experiences that I was talking about, you know, at the very beginning, so that when you do graduate, you're going to have more of a chance to find employment. So I hear what you're saying. So I would say, if you are a student, come and see me early. If you are a staff or faculty member, encourage your students, if you're from other campuses, to see their career centers as soon as possible. Develop that plan.
I think also, just to piggyback on that idea also, when I was looking at students transitioning, a lot of times it's the 11th hour because the students don't always necessarily understand that once they hit college, it's their responsibility to seek out services. I think that as an education system, we're doing a poor job of educating these students in high school that once you graduate, you're no longer covered under IDEA and adults have to help you with all this stuff. Now you're covered under ADA 504, where it's your responsibility to seek out. And I think that's not being translated well between, you know, secondary and post-secondary education also.
I want to say amen to that.
Right.
I want to say amen to that. I grew up with a disability. Mother wanted to really overprotect me because I was her child. But I had to learn to be independent, and that first bus ride, which almost made me have a heart attack, was the awakening of independence. the idea that I could do it on my own, and a lot of folks who are early on disabled, early on in either at birth or early, come to the four-year experience with about a junior high experience in self-determination. And one of the jobs that I see that, and we still get it in the graduate, is teaching that student how to do things on their own. The interesting thing that happens is as they begin to do it, you see self-esteem grow, you see self-reliance grow, because it wasn't there before. I think that's one of the things that and now on the graduate level, I still see it, especially kids who were born with their disabilities. Mom and dad come to the center, and I will say it happens one time, because we tell mom and dad, they're in graduate school, you don't do this, it's over. Because they have to learn to do it on their own, because they're gonna be PAs and doctors and PTs, they can't have you in the clinic with them. So we have to have that conversation, I think, at the beginning of four-year experience, rather than when I get them as wanting to be PAs and doctors. You already get on.
Question? Brenda, and that is, could you share with us how you managed to accommodate a student to get a MD, a medical degree, and actually become a medical practitioner, and who happened to be blind, what kinds of things you did, and also share with us what you did with the student that had TASIC. This was, when I talked to Brenda, it was just fascinating to me how this was accomplished, but it did work, and successfully so.
I'll begin with the student with Tourette's syndrome. We had a student who was second in his class. This was not an intellectual problem. This was not, in fact, he didn't need an accommodation, but he had Tourette's syndrome, and his ticking involved some of the typical kind of ticking that folks with moderate Tourette's will have, but he had one special one. He had a siren, and when he got very stressed out, that siren could be heard outside of the building. And the students couldn't work. It wasn't him that needed to be accommodated in this case. We worked with him and built a little module on the room, like over there with an window and a two-way communication that was soundproof. And a lot of the women who were in their 8th and 9th month of pregnancy would join it. We made it big enough for multiple people to be in it. And he graduated with he had no academic problems at all. His stress at stressing the class was beginning to affect his performance. When we did that, the performance went back up. He then went into rotations, and all of you who know about clinical schools know that you have to do that. We had to accommodate some of his timing because some of his tics would be interpreted by especially some seniors as swear words. You know that wonderful thing. So we would work him in the afternoon when there were less in the pharmacies. We'd put him at Rancho and places where people were used to working with individuals with traumatic brain injury and other disabilities. When he graduated, he graduated, got a $50,000 bonus, and now is with a major chain doing research on pharmaceuticals for them. The second individual was, when he came to us, was blind. He had graduated with straight A's in the University of Washington. He had done it in science. He had lost his sight 10 years previously. That's important. He had perception of what we could describe. He had seen. He then came to us. We looked at ways in which we had to communicate the information. Now, of course, the faculty was hyperventilating, and I can say very much so. But we came up with ways that we looked at his assets. If you describe a cell and describe the color, he knew what the color was because he could see. We used raised line description for parts of the body, parts of the brain, because he was an engineering mind. That's how he thought. When we went through the gross anatomy program, he gridded everything he learned in his brain and memorized it. He became a tutor. Because now we had to put him in front of him during the test, we had to have him test class. He had extended time. We positioned him. He would then tactily cover the area where the pen was and describe what it was. He got between 85 and 95 on all tests. In neurology, we had to do some raised line. We did a lot of, he never slept, I don't think. His books were electronic on tape. Now we just send them with screen readers with JAWS. And finally, when he was in rotations, we had a PA work with him, and the rule was this: you will never give an answer, you will only answer the questions, describe what he has to have described, exact for looking the ear, the eye. And she went through a surgical rotation with him. By the way, we know this, Docs don't do anything in rotation to people except look at them and hold one instrument to say they held an instrument. They don't actually provide surgery. But the doctor wanted him to understand post and pre-surgical conditions, waking up, for example, from anesthesia, what he needed to know as a primary practitioner. That PA got the best grade on the boards for the PA boards for surgery that year, and he graduated with honors. He now works at Patton State Hospital and is one of their lead psychiatrists. He had unfortunately, his guide dog that we went through school with finally passed away, but that guide dog had a sensitivity that was unbelievable. Everybody says, well, how will he do this and how will he do that? That guide dog, not all guide dogs can do this, it's like people, would let him know when somebody was super distressed in a group by putting his head on him and then walking over to her or him. That the guide dog was the most exceptional dog we ever knew. His new one's a little young, we don't know if he has that skill yet. But that's how we got him through, is we didn't look at what could be done, we looked at his assets. How did he learn? How did he understand? How did he memorize, or how did he process? And we adapted the environment to those things. And a lot of it was tactile, a lot of it, of course, had to be done that way. A lot of it was a lot of reading. I told him he would never have, he was newly married, didn't see his wife for 2 years, virtually except Christmas. And he studied twice as much as any other student, but he decided this was his goal, and today he's met it.
We do have a microphone going around, so if you do have a question, just put your arm up and we'll come around and answer. Okay.
Thank you for coming. I have a question about the mental health issues that you were speaking of earlier, and the increase and more attention with kids being drawn to this issue. And so I'm wondering about what kinds of infrastructures you're needing or seeing that you're going to be needing in place to be able to offer services for students with mental health issues in the future. And also students with autism. So as students with autism get older and they take in the university settings, how are you adjusting your services and your settings to be able to support these students?
Break it up.
With respect to what we do on an operational basis out of the Office of Disability Services, we, in my office, we would have a regular case management meeting with the counseling center on campus, and that, provided my schedule didn't get cluttered with a million other things, which was typically the case, we would meet every 2 weeks. And we had a caseload that we shared that was huge. The counseling center and I, we had releases in place between the students in our office that would allow us to speak with the counseling center, and the counseling center had the appropriate releases where they could disclose certain amounts of information and move further also. But in those meetings, the students were aware that we were discussing the accommodations that they received, the experience with the faculty members, their encounter in social organizations on campus. Some students did and did not want their family members to know, so we talked about whether the counseling center and I were on the same page with respect to family members knowing. So I believe we call that case management. That counseling center case management was a very critical piece of the infrastructure necessary to facilitate a seamless transition of services for students with mental health disorders across the campus. In addition to that, being able to go to the actual departments, to the department meetings where the faculty members are, and do, I call it the dog and pony show of what the Office of Disability Services had to provide and what we had to offer, and having an opportunity to go in and talk to them in some instances particularly about the needs of persons with mental health disorders in their classes. The biggest challenge was I don't see it, so I don't believe it exists. That was the biggest challenge that most faculty members had to contend with. In my opening comments, I spoke of the need for there to be a campus culture or a campus climate that is understanding and embracing of the concept of disability, whether it be someone that you can see that has a disabling condition as evidenced by some type of wheelchair or walker or cane or crutch or something like that, or you know that they're blind, you know that they're deaf or hard of hearing, low vision, what have you, or as well as those types of disabling conditions that are hidden, invisible, that you cannot see. So I would go to the different department meetings with faculty members and speak specifically on the reality of the limitations that students with mental health disorders face and how real they are, just as real, limitations as the limitations that students with disabilities, that you can see face. So those two things, I would say, and also being able to get a welcome seat around the conversational table with administrators and management of the campus, to be able to talk to them about the need to be able to incorporate support for students with disabilities into the systemic structure of what they're doing as a campus. So those three things, the case management, getting invited to faculty meetings, and also being able to get a welcome seat at the tables of administrators to build the embracing of disability into the systemic structure of the campus. I know you talked about the students that are, have autism. Did you, I know you both responded, could you? Okay.
I think Tammy's right in that we all need to start off on the premise that accommodating students and providing access is not a department responsibility, it's a college responsibility. And establishing that culture and building that culture in the college doesn't happen overnight, but you need to find the appropriate connections and allies and resources to try to help that. In terms of counseling, we do much of the same. We have a very close relationship with our counseling office. The students in our region, in Riverside, many come from low-income backgrounds, and the only type of health service they receive is actually through our counseling center. And we can't refer them off campus to receive any other sorts of services. So many times that counseling center, that sort of connection they make with RCC is the only health service they'll be receiving while they're students, because they have student fees that pay for that. And so having that close relationship really helps. I'll speak a little more to the autism and kind of what we do to address those needs. Boy, where do I start? We have, we're actually doing it at UCI we did, and at RCC I'm starting a social skills club for students with autism, for students on the spectrum. And for those of you who don't know, that autism is actually on the spectrum. I think we oftentimes perceive autism as, you know, an individual either being so low functioning that they're going to need lifetime care and a behavioral aid, or the opposite side of the spectrum, you know, the image of Rain Man, someone with some sort of genius gene who can do something but is socially inept in some areas. There's a huge spectrum of students we've seen. We try to address that in a social skills group. We'll talk about how to approach a faculty member. So we'll have different structures, you know, how to approach a faculty member, how to work in groups, which is so difficult for many of these students. We'll bring in faculty members so that they can serve as models, and the students can feel as if it's okay to talk about these issues in front of a faculty member, in front of someone's class who I'm going to be in. We'll bring in other students to model appropriate behavior. So having that social skills group is good, but it also takes a lot of commitment in going out to faculty meetings and going out to department chair meetings. We're doing a presentation next week specifically for faculty called Autism in Post-Secondary Education, because many of the issues we're seeing from instructors, you know, they present as if they're behavioral issues in the class. That's how they're presenting. And so immediately the student will get funneled to the dean of students. And in that meeting, the student will say, well, I have Asperger's, I didn't mean to be rude. I really did have 20 questions. You know, I just wanted to ask them. And so then they come down back to us. And so we're trying to stop that loop that the student has to go through by going to the faculty first. Keep in mind, registering with our office is completely voluntary. And so many students with autism, Asperger's, or any other type of disability, they don't have to come through our office. We prefer that they do, just to set up a plan in the event that they need our services later on. But for many of the students with autism, they don't come because educationally, academic-wise, they're fine. They're knocking out their classes, they're getting A's on tests, they're progressing through. It's the behavior issue. So we never see them, in most cases, until there's a behavior issue. So it's building those connections with faculty and the department chairs so that they feel they can come to you first, so that we can address if anything can be done before it becomes a behavioral issue.
Looks like we have time for one more question, maybe some closing comments. Two? Okay.
Hi, my name is Nicole Smith, and I'm an autism specialist for Cal State Long. And we put together a program called the Life Project. And I think we may have worked semi-closely with the same consultant, because formerly it was called Social Club. And
did, at UCI, we used it a little more, and we used it a little more because, the students were matriculating through for 4 years, really, 5, 6 sometimes. And so we knew that we would have a built-in peer support group to move along with the students that we were working with. So it was much easier. At RCC, I'm not quite sure that's going to be a viable option because students at RCC can come and take 1 class, 2 classes, and then we may never see them again. And to set up a peer support group with that kind of trust and that kind of communication, only to have a student leave after a semester to pursue another goal, not because they don't like the club, makes it very difficult to convince the students that we're trying to reach that the support is constantly going to be there. So it was easier at a 4-year college, and I commend you for doing that because it's important to see that. We would have group outings. I'm sure you guys do that too. We'd have group outings where we'd say, okay, well, UCI would have a basketball game. So it's a social night. So we'll go out with the peers, and then we'll go out to the basketball game. We'll go out and get food. I think a misperception around students with autism Asperger's is that they're antisocial. They're not antisocial. They have difficulty socializing. They want to break down those barriers. So I think that we need to break through that misperception that, well, they can't social and they don't want to. That's completely different. So anything you can do to build into your program to kind of bring them into the mainstream of the college, whether it be actually making a club. Our club was an actual club on campus. We had a charter, different rules, they pay dues. Anything you can do to make it an actual club, I think would be really beneficial.
And I would like to address this to the entire crowd. We spoke early in the presentation about the students who come in at the 11th hour and helicopter parents and the thing. And one thing that struck me was the language that we're using about these students calling them kids. So we have to really address students the way we want them to behave. Given that, we talk about them coming in at the 11th hour because they're not there. Could you address the issue of not coming in because of the social stigma that immediately becomes attached to you when you self-disclose?
I will begin with that. We started out and we were called the traditional students with disabilities. This is a professional school. These are professional students who are getting ready to enter, interestingly enough, the medical profession, which is most guilty of putting labels on people. So they were afraid, especially those with hidden disabilities, learning disabilities, anxiety disorders, mental health issues, but also those who could hide their disability sometimes. If you're in a wheelchair, you're not hiding it. You're blind and you're using a white cane, you're not hiding it. So we changed the name to Accommodations and Resources Center. And when we did that, it was really fascinating. We have a veterinary medicine program that uses what's called practice learning, where you don't just have lectures. In fact, you have very few lectures. You have to go and you're in groups and you research it. Kids don't learn that way in our school districts. Kids with disabilities and learning in particular never learn that way. So we had a rise of students with no disabilities but temporary anxiety because of this new learning style, because we changed the name of the center. It doubled our 1 year, and so we had to go to the dean and talk about how do we help these kids before they get into that place where we're making them disabled, actually. And we had to do that, changing our name and the way in which we communicate. We have regular training every year for faculty and deans on what we're doing and why it's important that we use the language we use, and to let students know from the minute they apply. So there's materials in the application, there's materials when they come to register, there's set materials that they know this is accepted, that we have open arms, and that includes folks who come in and report to us HIV and Hep C, because we're going to help them through the process of finding out if their condition is stable and they won't need to worry about it, or if they really need to look at their profession given that they can't get stable. And so we use a very open, from the first brochure you get, you see us, to the time you talk to your professor, to the time you go to the student affairs office. You learn about, this is a place you can go, we encourage it, there's nothing going to happen to you if you go there. In fact, probably you'll do better. And that's kind of how we approach.
I'd like to also respond to your question, if I may. I see Dr. Duke's name here on the program a little later on. He and I presented actually maybe some years ago, I don't remember how long ago, but to an organization called the College Board. I don't know if many of you are familiar with this or not. But anyhow, we made a presentation to the College Board that was geared towards parents of students with disabilities in the K-12 system. And we had not enough space to accommodate all of the parents that showed up. Many of the parents were from underrepresented groups, from disadvantaged communities, who had no idea what to do with their child who had a disability in the K-12 system. So we went through the laws that pertain to their student in the K-12 system and what will happen when those laws go away, when they transition, as you said, in the higher education system. So that's one thing. If you hear presentations in your communities of folks who are talking about the things that your student with a disability will need to be aware of, and that you will need to be aware of as a parent, I would encourage you to encourage parents that you have in your sphere of influence to avail themselves of those opportunities. The other thing is that at La Sierra, I was on my way to making this happen, and it was actually scheduled for this summer, but to become a part of the campus orientation system process, so that there is either a session in the orientation program specifically for parents and students with disabilities, for undergraduate students that are coming in, or be able to have a standalone orientation session for parents and students with disabilities, their parents, and sometimes you have to break them out because the students want to say things on their own, and that's good because you're going to be talking to them, not the parent. And you're going to be able to address the parent who's having a hard time letting go, who's hovering in the no-fly zone as you go about being a helicopter parent. So, and they have those programs for, they provide tissue and Kleenex and warm shoulders and all this stuff for parents and students in general. And so being able to incorporate a program into the orientation session of the university or the college to be able to show parents this is going to be the experience of your child as a student with a disability, a student with a disability, a person with a disability, that she so eloquently brought out here at this institution. And then also talking with the student, it is your responsibility now, mommy and daddy, it's no more, it's you. So we bring that out in the orientation session to help facilitate or minimize that 11-hour experience.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to thank all our panel. We'll do some closing thoughts. I want to thank all our panel for giving their time today. And then if we had any closing thoughts, we could reference that.
Okay. I guess I'll continue. I guess I'll do my closing comment and continuation of that discussion about, in terms of career management. I mean, if students come at the 11th hour, I can still help them. It's just easier if they come earlier. And I think in my case, if students wait, it's just an issue of time management and feeling stressed, and you're so focused on your classes, so less about being afraid to ask for help. But I would say that one of the common questions I get is, what kind of employers are going to be, more receptive to certain populations. There's a lot of organizations that highlight that, and I was going to share one of them. Equal Opportunity Publications, it's EOP.com. They have an annual career fair every year that highlights employers that are really focused to all types of populations. And you might say, well, if I can't go to the national conference, the one thing you could do is at least look at who is going to that event. There's a whole list of exhibitors / employers that go to that event. So that answers the question. These are employers that are going to be more open and willing to take applications from a variety of people. And then, interestingly enough, in the discussion about the helicopter parents, employers are more and more recognizing that they have to be more accommodating to all different types of people, and if they're going to be a successful organization. And I read that someone shared with me an article that employers are now, to be more accommodating to the millennial generation, having bring your parents to work day. And I'm looking at my boss right there. I promise I won't be bringing my parents, trust me. But it's just interesting to see that employers are recognizing that they've got to be open to all different kinds of people if they're going to be a successful organization. So that's my closing comment.
I'll say that we're all here because we obviously care about the students we work with, and we want nothing but the best for them. And we want, really what we want is for them to want the best for themselves. And so I would encourage all of us to connect with whoever you can, whether it be a listserv, whether it be a professional organization. I know KPED, which is the California Association for Post-Secondary Education and Disability, which is why they call it KPED, and they don't call it that long name, has a conference next week. I know AHEAD is a national organization, and I'm not sure when their conference is, but those types of conferences where you can connect with other disability service providers are absolutely fantastic. If your budgets don't allow for it, then those listservs are great too. It's a breath of fresh air to go on a listserv and realize many other people are seeing the same types of issues that you're seeing. And you may not have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe someone's already come up with a pretty great solution that you can borrow. So in general, you try to think outside the box when you're working with students. Realize that many students don't even want to be associated with your office. My office is called DSPS, which stands for Disabled Students Programs and Services. And I cringe. I never call it by the full name because I don't like the full name, Disabled Students. And it's a remnant of when the program was started by the California Community Colleges in 1976. We're already trying to change our name because we realize students are like, someone referred me to DSPS and I just kind of shivered with it. So think outside the box. Working with veterans, I don't know if Mohamed's still here. Many of our veterans want nothing to do with us. So we go to their Veteran Resource Center and we do our accommodation process through them. We meet them where they're at, where they already feel comfortable, where they feel safe. And then if they'd like to come to our office later and feel more comfortable, we'll have that discussion with them. But it's about thinking outside the box and realizing you're there to provide equal access for the student. So best of luck in all that you do, and I don't know if our contact information is there, but if any of you would like to contact me, please don't hesitate.
Well, continuing to providing resources for further follow-up, I want to introduce RESNA, which is we have Vision Engineering Society of North America. It's a very important body. They are basically setting the standards for all kinds of assistive technology, from wheelchairs all the way to bodily support services. And if you want to see what is the net, what's going on right now, you can go to the website. It's very user-friendly. And the other one is CSUN Annual Disability Conference. It is right in our backyard. And basically, people come from all over the world to see what's going on over there. It's 2-3 days of conference, and it is very informative. Thank you very much.
I feel like I said a lot, and so I don't know what else to say, but that I am an advocate, of course, for students with disabilities, and that I just echo the sentiments of everyone who's spoken before me, and certainly to come after me here, and that we have come a long way in terms of what we do as disability services providers and making accessibility the name of the game. I do want to say that accessibility is the name of the game. Making the experience, educationally speaking, that students without disabilities have. And let me say this, there are a number of students across campuses who are disabled, who have disabilities, but will never come to the Office of Disability Services, who you and I may say or suspect have some type of disabling condition. They're just not registered with your office. And so there's probably more folks registered that have disabilities than we even see in our offices. Thankfully, at a small institution like Lassier, we didn't see it at all. But anyway, I just wanted to say that accessibility is the name of the game, and I think if we can all band together via organizations like KPED and AHEAD, and AHEAD does, have those webinars that you can go make this stuff available to, and sit right in your office and build your awareness that way, that are far less expensive than actually having to travel to the conferences every summer. So being able to reach across out of California through various resources, through professional organizations, through listservs, through symposiums like this, and doing all that we can to improve the experience of students with disabilities in higher education and making accessibility really, really the name of the game and the goal. I think that would be the best way for us to forward our efforts.
keys to success. And it's something I learned. I never saw a successful person with a disability working until I saw my rehab counselor who was blind. So how would I believe that I could ever work? One of the keys is not just to think of it as student services, but a university population. We work with our professors and our administrators to be peers to students if they ask. We don't talk about those, because we get them as well and for accommodations, because we serve everyone. And I had a student who had extreme obsessive compulsive behavior. He was brilliant. We helped him on it, but we also gave him to a surgeon who worked with us part-time, who had come to us and acknowledged his own obsessive compulsive disorder. And he tutored him through and showed him how he could be a surgeon. He's now a New York surgeon making very good money because he saw someone who looked like him. So faculty can help by understanding, and faculty and staff and administration can be supportive. But if your own president, if you have a disability that you believe you can show a student and show that that success exists, you're now creating the wonder in the individual that there is, in fact, you see children's books with people in professions in wheelchairs who are blind. No. It's one of the things we have to do is begin in elementary school and move up, showing people successful in occupations. And that's what we need to do with the colleges, is have those role models who can say, whether they're students or their faculty or their administration, I'm here. Oh yeah, I do this and this and this really well, and I happen to need assistance on that, and here's the way you can do it. I think we'll see much better successes if people are allowed to see themselves in the roles that they imagine only other people can be in.
Thank you, and thank you for the wonderful questions from the audience and to our panelists once again. Turn it back over to you.
You know, my vision of this conference